Oh, don't mind me. I'm just coughing my guts out. Hello, everybody. Welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert, and welcome to the live stream that I do once a week, where it's basically a Q&A for me. So if you have any questions, anything to do with careers, hiring, job search, that kind of stuff, and you are a subscriber to my channel, you should be able to get in the chat and ask questions, and I'll do my best to help you out. This is episode number 156 of How to Get Hired. It's called Your Resume Isn't the Problem. Live job search fixes. So we are going to start off talking about that. But first, a shout out goes out to all my YouTube channel members. You guys are awesome. My Patreons. Also, and my super thanks donors. Those are always nice to get. And to you, my viewers and participants, you guys are awesome. Thank you for being here. Someone is here that says, hello, everyone. Well, hello to the person with the name that's got about 35 letters in it. Thank you for being here. Carl, I'm just going to call you Carl. So, yeah, let's get on with this. So your resume isn't the problem. A common misapprehension, shall we say, is that if you go to a job interview, for example, and you don't get the job, the problem is with your resume. That is not the case. The problem, if there is one, is not your resume. The resume has done its job just fine. It got you the interview. Right? Now, there might be another problem to do with your interviewing skills, but in order to determine that, you would have to go to like 20 interviews in a row and not get a single offer. That would be more suspicious that there's something wrong with your interviewing ability. But that's not the fault of your resume. The other issue, of course, is that most people do not get hired by applying to posted jobs with a resume. That's something that was more prevalent in the past, but that's not really how most people get hired anymore. Something like 85% of the jobs are not posted. So if that's new to you, if that seems fishy and you've never heard that before, go do your own research on it. I encourage you to do that because the more deeper you look, you'll see that this is true. Your resume exists for a very specific job, and that is to get you an interview. That's what its purpose is. It doesn't get you hired, it simply gets you the interview. That's the application phase. The interview is more about your personal skills, your soft skills, who you are as a person. That's what the interview is about. And that's usually the basis upon which they hire somebody, right? Because everyone they're talking to is qualified, or else what would be the point of bringing them down to an interview? They're technically qualified. So to choose between several people who are all technically qualified, you look at who they are as a person, and that's what's going on in the interview, right? Patience says, hey everyone, nice to be connected. Well, welcome, Patience. Thank you for being here. Yeah, and that's the deal. Now, for those of us who are still kind of, struggling with this, right? Let me see if I can back that up somewhat. I like to use ChatGPT when I do my live chats because it's a quick and easy way for people to see that what I'm saying doesn't come from me. It's actually a thing. So I'm doing a live stream on YouTube, and the topic is, what was the topic again? The topic is, your resume isn't the problem. That's the deal. So in about 100 words, can you give me, let's say 200 words, what would one talk about on that topic? I'm doing this so you can see that what it says is hopefully going to mimic what I was saying, and it's obviously not original to me. Most job seekers assume their resume is the problem because it's the one thing they can see and edit, but most of the time the real problem is how the job search itself works. A resume only matters after someone decides to seriously consider you. Okay, before that, hiring is driven by visibility, timing, and trust. Most jobs are filled internally. Okay, yeah, so if you're going the networking route, then you're not leading with your resume anyway, right? So that's a different thing. But here we go. So when someone applies online to dozens of postings and hears nothing back, they conclude the resume must be weak. okay, well, that's probably random chance. In reality, they're competing in the most crowded part of the market where hundreds of applicants look similar. The real lever isn't endlessly tweaking bullet points. It's changing how you approach the market. That means networking, reaching out directly, becoming known to people inside companies, and creating conversations before a job is officially posted. Okay, well, that's not exactly what I was hoping for, but it does kind of highlight the central themes of what I talk about here, which is that if you're looking for a job by applying to jobs that have been posted online or out in the real world, okay, that is not a great place to look for jobs. Most people do not get hired like that. It's the default thing for a lot of people that are not really tuned into the stuff. The problem is something like 80% of the job seekers are all competing for those 15% of the jobs. So it's extremely competitive. That's why when they post a job, they're getting inundated with 800 job applicants. So that's what makes it unnaturally difficult, where you're going head to head with 800 other people, right? You can still win at that game. It still is possible. It's just that it's very tough, right? So the alternative is to do what people have always done to get jobs, which is networking. Now, if you're an introvert, you don't like talking to people in person, I don't blame you. I'm an introvert myself. I'm a technical person. The good news is you don't have to do any of that to connect to people. In this world of social networking, it's actually pretty damn easy and straightforward to do that stuff. You could do it right from your computer. So there you go. Now, I'm here to answer questions on anything related to job search. So how to pass an interview, how to write a resume, how to do networking, what the perspective of the hiring manager might be, that kind of thing, right? How do I get into management? What are the differences between how they hire managers versus how they hire workers? It's all fair game. So we got 14 people here. Let me know what you guys are wondering about, and I'll be happy to go in any direction you're interested. In the meantime, yep, I did all my public service announcements. Yeah. We can certainly talk about resumes. You see, a while ago, it was never really like the main way of getting a job. It never was. That's the thing. In the 80s and 90s, before the internet came around, it was a little bit more prevalent than it is now. Ironically, even though we're on the internet now, it's actually harder to get a job from applying to jobs, because the problem is that although it's easier to search for jobs and it's easier to find them, which is obviously a good thing, the problem is that because it's so easy and it's so easy to apply, the amount of competition goes up exponentially. That's the problem. When you can apply for literally 1,000 jobs in a day, it makes it quite difficult to compete, on that playing field. That's the problem. Still can be done, but it makes it tough. Now, if you're going to do that game, if you're going to play that game, it's a matter of tailoring your application to the exact role. That's the thing. The days of being able to submit like a static resume that you keep one resume that represents you and you use it to apply for like every job. Those days are kind of over. You could still do that, but you won't really get anywhere. You could apply for 1,000 jobs like that and be lucky to get one interview. That's the thing. Jit. I'm going to call you Jit. Just the first letters of the name here. How do I get my first job? I thinking to get SOC, whatever that is, analyst L1, whatever that is, job role by next month. Just so you know, I'm talking to people all over the world in every industry, so I don't understand acronyms. Chances are, if you use an acronym, I won't know what you're referring to. There are many ways to get a first job. There are the big question that's usually associated with that is, how do I get my first job with no experience? Because that's what a lot of first-time career job type people are encountering, which is like nobody wants to hire you because you don't have any experience, and you can't get any experience because nobody wants to hire you. So it seems like a vicious circle, a catch-22, right? Well, the way to break that is to get hired the way everybody gets hired in the world of networking. You're not hired because you're the best person on the planet. You're hired because you're the only one who showed up. That's the idea. So this is great news because you don't have to be the best at anything. You don't even have to be amazing at anything, really. What distinguishes you is the fact that you showed up. You're the one that wanted it. You're the one that's seeking it out. So it's a combination of being passionate / interested and showing initiative, right? Nobody is telling you to go show up at the company and go talk to the person who's in charge of, that group where you want to work, right? Nobody's telling you to do that. That's not an official procedure, right? You have to take the initiative and say, like, look, I've got skills in this area. I would love to work here. If ever you're looking, I hope you'll consider me. I live right over there. I've taken all the education I need to do this kind of thing, and I'm just hoping there's an opportunity. That's basically how you approach the company, right? At its simplest. That's the simplest form, right? So how many other people are doing that for the type of job that you want? How many other people do you think are going to see the person? I would guess 0. That's pretty common, right? So if you do it, instantly you've elevated yourself above the crowd, above your competitors, because they might be resumes on a desk, right? They're strangers, they're resumes on a desk. In contrast with you've met the person, right? You've met the decision maker. Not only can they see that you're dedicated and serious because you came all the way down to talk to them, right? But they've gotten a sample of what you're like in person. They've got a sample. They've seen with their own eyes how professional you are, how interested you are, how agreeable and easy to deal with you are, right? They've seen that. They've got a feel for, like, would you guys work well together, This is all light years ahead of any other candidate. They're all resumes on a desk. They're all strangers. This decision maker has not talked to any of those people. They have not interacted with them, right? So now you're head and shoulders above all the other people applying for it or wanting it, and that's why you're in the lead for this. Right? So that's the idea. You don't get hired because you're the best in the world. You get hired because you're the one that showed up. And that's how you break that catch-22 cycle of they won't hire me because I have no experience, but I can't get experience because they won't hire me. Right? So maybe that helps. I'm not sure. Cabbage Patch Soup says, I have an upcoming interview for a job that is a step up from my previous job. How can I sound confident even though in the new position I will be doing work I've never done before? Okay. Here's the deal. 2 things. Number one, the first thing that you can do is rehearse. Okay? It's hard to appear confident doing something for the first time. Okay? Now, what you can do is you can at least rehearse a job interview, right? So at least it's not your first time doing a job interview. You're nervous. You don't know what they're going to ask. You don't know the answers to any of the questions. Right? So that's the part that you can control easily, right? Is the whole job interview part of this experience, right? So specifically for that, learn the answers to the common job interview questions, right? I've done many videos. There's a lot of resources online. Then rehearse solo, like practice by yourself or practice in a mirror, like reciting the answers or remembering what your answer is going to be to all these different questions, right? Okay, do that. Most people do that anyway. But then do the second part, the second phase, which a lot of people skip, which is rehearse with someone else. So go grab a friend or family member or someone like that, get them to do some mock interviews with you, where they pretend to be the interviewer, and you do this as a rehearsal. and they decide what questions to ask, or they make them up, or you give them a list or whatever. And then they're going to act like the interviewer. If it feels a bit weird and awkward, that's good, because that's simulating what the actual thing's going to feel like. You run through it a whole bunch of times, maybe with different friends or family members. You do the rule of thumb that I recommend is doing 30 of these. That's like 3 a day for, 10 days, right? Or thereabouts. That would be ideal, right? Because what I'm telling you is that if you do 30 of these, you're going to be a lot more confident. You're going to be, you're not going to be nearly as stressed, because you've been over this so many times. You know what the questions are. You know the answers you're going to say backwards and forwards, and you know what I mean? So confidence can come from that, definitely, right? You're not going to be as stressed and nervous, or you're going to appear more confident. Now, in as much as the technical qualifications are concerned, like you've never done this job before, but you have to feel confident answering technical questions about it, or giving them assurances that, oh yeah, it's not going to be a problem. The only thing you can really do is do your research on the job. Now, if you're totally disconnected from it, just go on the internet and watch videos and read articles about the job itself. Go to ChatGPT, what do you do in this role? What's your day-to-day look like? What are the common tools that you use in that job? What are the biggest challenges, and what do experienced people find are the best solutions? Ask these kinds of questions, right? So if you're not connected to it, you could do that. If you can be connected to it, that means you could sit down with a person who's done it, then obviously do that, right? And grill them and get them what's the most important skill? What's the most important thing you've learned how to master this job? What's the thing that your boss cares about the most? And how do you supply that? Right? That's the kind of stuff you can do to get that information, and then you will feel better about going into the interview, and then confidence does come with time, right? I know that doesn't help you now, but practice makes perfect. You do a few of these and you feel that, you'll see that you appear more confident. Hopefully that helps. Okay, so JIT says the SOC means Security Operations Center Team. Okay. Understood. Thanks, sir. Okay, awesome. Good stuff. RFM says soft skills. Now, RFM that's a new person. So soft skills equals second round, ending question equals last memory or closing questions. What advice for following up to stand out of the crowd? Okay, what? Soft skills equals second round, whatever the hell that means. Ending question equals last memory or closing questions, whatever that means. What advice for follow-up to stand above the crowd? Well, you can't really stand above the crowd, nor is that really what people want. If you're wanting to be memorable, the only thing that they care about, first of all, you haven't told me what this is. So assuming you're going through a recruiter, okay? If you're going through a recruiter and you're dealing with a recruiter for a posted position, okay, this very regimented artificial thing, what they care about is the candidate who meets the requirements closer than any other. That's what they're looking for, okay? The other thing they're looking for are risk factors, right? Things that could suggest you wouldn't work out. So, for example, you want too much money, or you have a history of job hopping, right? Those are risk factors. If you, or like a long work gap, these are things that in their mind suggest you have a higher likelihood of not working out if they were to pick you, right? It's all based on stereotypes and assumptions and statistical probability. That's all this stuff is. It's not based on anything real. Just assumptions about you. Right? So the other thing is that interviews are all about soft skills. I don't know what you mean by second round. All interviews are based on soft skills. I don't care what anybody says. That's the whole point. Or else, why do any of this? It's a pain in the ass. Why do it? They could just easily give you a questionnaire if it wasn't about soft skills. It's because they want to see you in person, and they want to see how you react and what you're like. That's the whole point of the interview. So don't be fooled by the fact that in order to have content to discuss, they're asking you questions about your qualifications and things. That's kind of incidental. So what advice to follow up or stand out of the crowd? Well, just go down there. Like I just recorded a video talking about this. What they're looking for is basically three things. Okay, there's three things that they're looking for, roughly speaking. The first thing is the stuff they explicitly mentioned in the job posting. So they said, we're looking for someone who has, and then they had like requirements, right? So those requirements, make sure you speak to those, okay? If you meet those requirements, great. Say it. Make sure they get that. You might have to say it a couple of times. If you don't quite meet them, but you're not worried that that requirement is really going to be any kind of problem for you in doing the job, then say that. Say like, look, I don't have 5 years experience with this, but I got 3.5. And in all honesty, I've spent those 3.5 years working with people that have 20 years experience in this. And I could handle every single scenario they could handle, So I'm really not worried about like not being experienced enough to do this job. I've done it, and I honestly don't think it's going to be a problem, so you're speaking to the requirements. You're assuring them that they're not going to be issues. You know what I mean? And a lot of times they'll be like, okay, fair enough. That makes sense. The second thing they're looking for are a lot of common things that they don't state explicitly. So, punctuality, integrity, decent communication skills, a positive attitude, collaboration skills, persuasion skills, presentation skills, public speaking skills, things that they don't list explicitly, but it's implied that, you would have to be strong in those other areas. If you don't know what those are, go to like ChatGPT or something and say, for this role, this title, job title in this industry, what are the most important skills that I would have to have that aren't usually listed in job postings? And it will tell you. It'll be things like soft skills and stuff, right? Okay. And then the third and final sort of thing that you would need are things that it's not the stuff that's listed in the job posting. It's not common things that everyone kind of understands that, you would need someone with that, right? Like common good skills and traits, but more specific, more idiosyncratic things that maybe they don't want to say out loud. They don't want to admit to, and they don't want to say out loud. Like, for example, they don't want someone that's going to come in and, be very, very smart and always push back because they find that the management is not super educated. The management is not doing things in a very efficient way. They don't want someone to come in and show up the boss, Like, that's something they're not going to admit to when pressed. But a lot of times that's a requirement. They might also want someone who's a bit of a sheep. They can push them around a little, and that person is going to quit or cause a big scene. They'll just take it and do their job and keep their head down, not rock the boat, right? That's another one. So the stuff that they won't admit to, but it's there, right? Sometimes it can even contradict. When they say like, oh yeah, quality is job one and our employees are like family and blah, blah, blah. What they really mean is the opposite of that. They really mean that, we want someone who's just going to do what they're told and not question us ever, because you're not paid to question us. We make the decisions. You do what we say. They want someone who understands that, right? Things like this, right? That they're not ever going to admit to. So that's the third group of things that they're looking for, right? They won't ever disclose that, but that's usually what's going on in the background. So if you have those three things, you find out what they are, and you can speak to them and you can signal them. That's all you can do, and you stand the best chance of them picking you. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if you have any further questions. Okay, RFM says, last week I had 4 interviews, went to the next step to have in-person schedule for next week. What standout advice would you give for the final interview? Well, just the general advice for the final interview is usually, if it's a final interview, what they do is they narrow it down to usually 3 candidates. And there could be some political stuff going on there. You have no idea. There's no way to tell. Sometimes people play games with that stuff. They'll they'll have like the one candidate that the recruiters say is recommending to the hiring manager, and they'll pair them with 2 candidates that aren't nearly as good, and they're there to just show how the third candidate is really good or something. They sometimes play games with that. But if they bring in some kind of big boss for the final interview, sometimes they bring in like the head of, like not the hiring manager, but the hiring manager's boss or some other person. They care about attitude, they care about ambition, and they care about the type of person that they would want in their organization, right? That has kind of similar values. So the only thing you can really do there when you're going in blind, unless you know a lot about the organization, is basically to mirror people a little bit, mirror the hiring manager so that, you seem like the type of person that would fit in there, that would get along with people there, that gets it, the way they do things there. That's the only advice I can really give. I mean, in a general sense, it's about that high level stuff. It's not going to be about your technical qualifications anymore. It's not going to be about details of what's on your resume anymore. It's going to be your general sort of attitude, and if you seem like you belong there or not. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Cabbage Patch Soup says, thank you so much. I'll find someone to practice with. That's great advice. Well, good. I hope it works out. Okay, we got a super chat. Thank you very much. I love super chats. This is from Berkeley. I'm going to say, I have 5 years personal lines insurance experience. I would like to move over to commercial insurance. What is your advice? Tough with little experience. Okay. This is what I'd say. So basically, it sounds like you're changing careers, but I don't know if that's too strong a description because you're still within insurance. It's just a different type of insurance. So, anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's sort of like changing careers. This is what I'd say. People never are able to change careers unless there's some weird exception going on. They're never able to change careers by going through recruiters and applying to posted jobs. Sorry, I just got to turn down my camera a little. The reason that doesn't work is because what is the recruiter's first question for any candidate when they're applying for something? The first candidate is usually, how many years experience do you have doing this, right? Now, your answer is going to be 0 because you're moving to this, right? To commercial insurance. So you could say, well, I've spent X many years in 5 years in insurance, but 0 years in this type of insurance. This is new for me, right? So what's the next thing going to be coming out of the mouth of the recruiter? It's going to be, then how could you possibly think you can do this if you've never done it before, right? Which is stupid and insulting, but nevertheless, that's how they think, right? So the way you get these jobs, the way you change careers in general, is you don't go through this process. You don't go through recruiters. What you do is you contact hiring managers. So who would the hiring manager be in this case? It would be the person in charge of a team in the world of commercial insurance. So maybe, I don't know, I don't work in insurance, so I don't know how it's structured, but maybe you have a group of 10 insurance adjusters or whatever they're called, policy reviewers or salespeople or like whatever we're talking about, right? And they report to a manager, insurance manager, commercial insurance manager, something like that, right? So the commercial insurance manager, their job is to make sure that their team processes all the commercial insurance claims or policies or whatever that come through, right? Their job is to get that work done. Now, they might realize, like, wait a minute, we're getting a huge workload here and I don't have enough people. We're employing people, we're paying overtime, we can't run this on overtime, we're going to need to hire more people, right? So imagine if you showed up and wanted to speak to that person. You requested an informational interview. You said, listen, I've got 5 years in personal lines insurance, and it's been going well, but I've always had an ambition to move over to commercial insurance. That's really what I want to do, and I don't know if the time is right to do that now, but I'm wanting to learn everything I can about the world of commercial insurance to see if, just what would make sense for me and where's this industry going and what skills are going to be needed in the future and things like this. So if you sit down with that manager of commercial insurance, they certainly would be able to answer those questions for you, right? Okay. Now imagine if just through luck of the draw, you reached out to a manager of commercial insurance that just happened yesterday to have realized that I need to add another person to my team, right? All of a sudden you land in their lap. And, you've got the right attitude, you've got the chops, by the questions you're asking, you clearly know insurance. And, you seem like a person that they would enjoy working with. You guys get along really well. You have a really good conversation, something like this. So what you can do is you can do that, right? And then, there's multiple things you could do. You could end the meeting, you say, thank you very much for your time. This was absolutely fascinating, really interesting stuff. If I ever have any other questions, would I be able to give you a call? Would that be possible? And the other person 90% of the time is going to say, sure, yeah, right? So what you could do is you could leave it there. You could come back, send them another message in like a week or something, or a couple of days and say, like, listen, I've been thinking about what you said to me. And, a lot of that stuff really was fascinating to me. It's really interesting. If ever you pursue some of those plans and ideas you were telling me about, please let me know, because I'd very much like to work with you on it if there was an opportunity, something like that, right? So this is what you do. You set up these informational interviews with all these people, right, in your hometown. And you go to them, you learn a lot, you map out that whole industry, you get an idea of what it's about, what they're looking for, and then you're planting these seeds as you go. Now, most of them won't go anywhere, because the odds are is that people are not hiring in these groups right now, right? But some of them will go somewhere, because the odds are is that maybe 5% or 1%, they're going to be hiring right now for someone like you, right? So that's the idea. So that's one way. There's a couple of different ways. That's all I can really get into here, but there's a lot of other things you can do. Check out this course. That's all my advice in one place, and I talk about the different things you can do. I also have a link in the description box below to a video I did called How Successful People Get Jobs. Okay, so that's linked in the description box below this live stream. Check out that video that shows you what that process kind of looks like to actually do it, to discover the contacts and reach out to them and stuff like that. Yeah, and that's like it's some version of that most people do to change careers. If you're an extrovert, you could do all this type of thing in person. You could reach out and discover people in person. But if you're an introvert, you really shy away from that kind of activity. You really don't enjoy it. Instead, you could do it online just as effectively. So that's what my videos are about and what I talk about mostly. So anyway, hopefully that helps, Berkeley. Mank says, hello guys, happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday indeed. Hump day. It's my close personal friend Sheenan Grief says, good day. Sheenan Grief says, so like good day. I made the experience that companies who want people to challenge the status quo usually don't want change. Yeah, well, the only people that usually want to challenge the status quo are the actual managers. Because if they're not meeting their goals, like the metrics that they're evaluated by, then you can rest assured that they want some kind of change. Now, a lot of those people, if they never went to business school, they have no idea what that change should look like, but they know that something's got to change, right? They might have delusional ideas about how to bring that about, but trust me, they want change. But no, that's why a lot of people intentionally hire external candidates, because they want change, they want new ideas. It's also why people would intentionally want an internal candidate, because they just want the status quo. Things are going well. We're doing fine. Hey, if next year we just had a replay of this year, we'd be laughing. That's good. So we don't want someone that's going to come in and change everything. What we've got is working. We just want to maintain this for a while. That's where you intentionally hire an internal candidate, someone who understands what you're doing and gets it. They've been here for a while, so they know. They're the ones that can maintain that, right? But remember, the world is a really interesting place made up of people who are mostly stupid, that don't really know what they're doing. And a lot of them can't even admit that, you know? So it leads to some really interesting things going on. Amir says, any tips if recruiter asks, why do you leave in less than a year? Well, like you're talking about on your resume, you stayed for less than a year, right? Well, there's a bunch of things. The obvious one, like whenever it's starting to get no longer applicable to say COVID, right? You know, because for a few years there, you could pull the COVID card and say like, it was COVID. Then they go, oh, say no more, right? But now we're back to that weird kind of thing where you can't say that. I would just say I was ready to do more, right? You see, it's a common job interview question. It's one of the 10 standard questions. There's about 10 of these. They always ask, right? And one of them is, why did you leave your last job, right? So that's kind of what they're asking. They're saying, why did you stay for less than a year? That's like saying, why did you leave, right? The conventional wisdom is that if you were laid off, you could say, I was laid off, right? Without cause. It's nothing that I did. It just the company was downsizing. They were losing money, and so they laid off like 20% of their workforce. And I was one of the junior people, so I was let go with them. I was laid off because of that. If you were laid off with a whole bunch of other people at the same time, I would say that's further evidence that there's nothing wrong with you, right? The problem is that the other explanations, now it could get you into trouble, right? So if you left, it may be possible to explain, but the problem is that like all they're hearing is, oh, you're the type of person that leaves. So now we're going to regard you as a high risk employee, right? You know, you decided to leave. You're the type of person who decides to leave. We give you a job and then you decide to leave after a few months. We don't want to hire a person like that, right? So it's not great if you say that kind of thing, right? It's even worse if you say I was fired, right? Because if you were let go with cause, meaning that they didn't like your performance and they had some issue with you and then they fired you, that's really bad, because now you're sending a signal to these people, oh, you're the type of person that gets fired. You're the type of person that when they hire you, you do such a bad job that they have to fire you, right? Like in less than a year. So So that's why you really want to try and not say these things, right? So the way I would phrase it, if someone asked me, as I would say, well, I was just ready to do more. Like that's a good catch-all. And then you talk about the types of things that you want to do. And coincidentally, you make that sound like the job you're applying for, right? And then you look like the perfect fit for it, right? So that way you avoid saying anything that's going to get you, disqualified. And then you turn it into a thing that makes you seem like a good fit for this job, right? That's what I would try and do. Now, sometimes they're going to try and like peel back the layers and say, we want to know. The bottom line is that you don't want to say anything negative about anyone in a job interview, including yourself. Don't talk about how you failed at things. Don't talk about how you got let go from jobs and stuff like that. Another thing that can kind of shut down this question is to say, well, there were no opportunities for advancement. It's the best of a bunch of bad things you could say, right? The problem with saying that is that then they think, oh, you're the type of person that wants to keep being promoted instantly. That's not necessarily true, right? You're just trying to not say you were fired or you hated your boss or something like that, right? So it's better than saying those things, but it would be better if you could just say, I was ready to do more, and then you talk about what you're ready to do. And coincidentally, it looks a lot like this job you're applying for. Okay? That's what I would say for that question. Sheenan Grief says, I remember rewatching your video answering this question before I had my interviews back in 2022. They accepted the one-liner you mentioned and we moved on. Okay, good. Yeah, that's the thing. Everything happens some of the time, right? That's the problem. Humans are complex. So sometimes, they'll just accept your answer and move on. Other times they'll no, we want to know, and they'll try and probe, and then that requires you sometimes to stick to your guns. Because if you give an answer and then they say, well, no, we want to know more, and then you go, oh, okay, and then you give them a whole bunch more, right? Then that's not good, right? You're playing right into their head. All they had to do was ask the question again, and they got through your defenses. You know what I mean? So the way to, a rule to keep in mind is that if you're kind of giving a strategic answer, right, and they respond by saying, well, we understand that, but then they ask their question again, right? Your response is to give your answer again. You say, well, like I mentioned, I was just ready to do more. It was just the right time. I'd done the whole job. There wasn't any more challenges really. Every day was kind of very similar, and it was the same thing I'd done, and I was good at it. And for some people that's perfectly fine, but for me, I'm still young, and I'd like to do more, and I haven't, I'd like to one day move up if possible. So it was just time to do more. You see, I just gave the same answer without buckling to any pressure. You know what I mean? So just keep that in mind. If they push you and they ask these questions again, stick to your answer. Don't just totally change and buckle and give them the full story just because they asked again. Advice: do not disclose your termination, redirect qualities of the job, describe positive attitude. Okay. Sure. Let me know if you guys have any questions. In the meantime, check out this course. This is linked in the description box below. It's all my advice in one place. This will teach you how to get hired in the posted job market. It'll also teach you how to get hired in the hidden job market. So that's with networking and all that kind of stuff. And it's geared to introverts. So if you're a technical person or you're an introvert, this is for you. This is the whole point of it. So check it out. What I talk about on the live streams and elsewhere on my channel are all coming from the same place that this course is. Like the course has basically got everything in it. So check that out. Now, I do have a couple other courses too. This is the main one, but like this is for learning business if people want to learn business. But this is the other one that I think people here might be interested in. This is if you want to improve your communication skills. This is a great course to take. What this will do is, first of all, if you're working in a job and you want to be perceived as somebody that should be promoted, right? This will help that. This will help change the perception that people have of you, and they'll regard you as a high-value employee that should be moving up. Okay, communication skills does that. It convinces people that you can do more than your current role. So that's the immediate, obvious value. But great communication skills will help you accomplish many other goals. They'll help you in many other situations. It's just a general good thing to have. Your career will go further if you have better communication skills. So check out this course. Yes, it's about writing, but more than that, it's about how to respond, and that's the key thing. So these are both linked in the description box below, and I've made videos about all of these courses. So, I go into how they work and what you get and, all that kind of stuff. I answer frequently asked questions. So check those out. Those are also linked below in the description box under this live stream. It's Amazed. Amazed is here. Amazed says, thank you, Bill, for the golden advice you're giving. Well, that's very kind of you, Amazed. One question, though. Do you believe in luck? That sometimes it applies to job search and success in life? Well, I don't know. I mean, I think each to their own, and people call it different things. You could call it luck. You could call it fate. You could call it chance. You could call it statistical probability, right? And I definitely believe in that. And that's what job search is, because even if you did everything right, like you were the perfect candidate, you did the best interview it's possible to have, you had the best resume it's possible to write, and it fit the job you applied for like a glove, okay? There still is a huge chance you won't get it for a variety of reasons. First of all, it could be a fake job. Secondly, there could be all kinds of political things going on behind the scenes with this job where, really they had an internal candidate lined up for it. They just posted it publicly to keep up appearances, to make it seem like they were considering other people, right? Or you did the interview with a hiring manager who saw that you were amazing, but then felt threatened. They said, I don't want a subordinate that's going to outshine me, right? So because you're so perfect, sorry, we're going to pass, So yes, there's a lot of random chance. You don't know what's going on the other end. There's all kinds of things sometimes going on the other end. So it's random chance. And then the fact that you've got 800 people competing for one job, 799 are going home with a no. Now, does that mean that only one person was qualified to do that job? Of course not. 500 might have been qualified. They had to sort of pare it down somehow, and sometimes some of the things that they used to pare it down were silly, So it's totally random chance, and that's what we see, Sometimes it's actually a blessing in disguise, They were looking for someone they could exploit, right? And you weren't it. You came across as a little too self-aware and sharp in the interview. They felt, no, we're not going to hire this person. They'll see what we're doing, and they'll push back. So you can call it whatever you want. I call it statistical probability. You could call it luck. You could call it fate. You could call it karma. You could call it a bunch of things. I think it applies to this stuff. Elijah says, I've recently been watching your videos on salary negotiation, and I've role-played them. I think, did you dress up like me? You might have to wear a fat suit. I think the ideology and logic is great. However, may I ask, how do you suggest in responding to a specific salary number that they give you? For example, maybe they're non-profit and they could be bluffing, or they legitimately don't have the budget to pay more. Okay, here's the deal. So if you've done everything properly, like you understand what you need and you understand what your position is, it doesn't matter what they do. If they suggest the right number or they suggest the wrong number, or it doesn't matter what they say. Your position is still the same, right? I need this. So if you can pay me that, like this is in the offer stage, by the way. If you're in the offer stage, you basically say, okay, thank you for the offer. It's fantastic. I'm really thrilled and excited that you've, and I feel privileged that you've extended this offer to me. Okay, now let's get into the details here of what specifically you're asking. I need this. All this stuff is great. That's no problem at all with any of this. I just need this change to this, and then I can start. Now, what they say doesn't really matter. If they're willing to change it, great. If they're not, and they do or say other things than the change you need, it's a no dice. Sorry. Like I explained, I need this. Let me know when you can do that. And if you can't do that, just say so. And then we know where we stand. It really doesn't matter what they do. You know what I mean? Right? You're not dependent on what they offer you. You state very clearly, this is what I need. The only question is, are they prepared to do that? Right? So it's a very simple situation. We're not talking about persuasion. I don't need to persuade you that this is reasonable and that you should want to do it, right? I'm just telling you, this is what I need. The end, right? So that's kind of how it works. So if they suggest a number, that's less than what you've said you needed, you could say, well, thank you for the offer. I appreciate you making some adjustments on my behalf, and don't think that hasn't gone unnoticed. However, as per my original statement to you, I need the number to be this, or unfortunately, I can't take it. So I'll leave that with you. The end. You dress it up in manners and protocol and politeness, but that's basically what you're saying. And if they don't have the budget to repay more, oh well, that's a heartbreaking story, and I'm sure they're going to try everything in their power to convince you of that, but that's expected, right? Kyle Quinn says, hey, I just joined the stream. Just real quick, what do you mean by your resume isn't the problem? Maybe you should rewind to the beginning of the stream when I actually explained that. That's all it takes to get the answer to that, Kyle. But I appreciate you being here. Mank55 says, hi, Bill. I know today's topic is the resume, but my question is, regarding entrepreneurship, how do you approach clients in person? Thank you. Well, I can't talk about that here, can I, Mank? Because everybody else here is here wanting to talk about job search, so I have to respect that. But I'll be happy to get into that on my live stream where I talk about entrepreneurship, which is on Mondays. And we can talk about it a little bit on the one I have on Friday, too, if you're around. Elijah says, is the context of you're already going through your 3-step process of salary negotiation? In the context of you're already going through your 3-step process of salary negotiation. You've already gone through the 3-step process of salary negotiation. Now, this was the question about what was it? They make some claim that they don't have the budget to do it. It's like, okay, that's fine. I'm very sorry to hear that. Hopefully you'll get somebody that you can afford that will work out for you. I don't know what you mean by that. I might have referred to like a 3-step process of salary negotiation within like one of my longer videos, just as a way of organizing it. Yeah, it's assuming that you've, like I think you said, you watched my video on salary negotiation. So within that context, how would you handle this question? I think that's what you said in essence, anyway. Yeah. But I believe I answered the question. You're basically, just to give you the very short version of it, it doesn't really matter what they say. This is my position. My position doesn't change based on your story. My position is based on my position. In order for me to take a job, it has to make financial sense for me. And if it doesn't, then I can't take it. Sorry. I'm sure you understand. We don't work for free. We got to pay the bills, So I need this much if you want me to accept this. That's just the way it is. So if you can do that, great. If you can't, I totally understand. And I wish you the best of luck with the next person. Diocrite says, would you have any advice for choosing between different career paths? For example, choosing a specialization? Yeah, I would make sure you get informed as to what you're doing. I wouldn't just pull it out of a hat. I would actually do all I can to understand the implications of this kind of binary decision that you have. Should I do this or should I do this? If you're talking about a specialization, like, I don't know, you're talking about, I want to be a scientist. Should I be a biologist or a physicist? Those are two different worlds. Once you go 10 years down the path for one of them, it's very hard to come back and then start from scratch in the other, right? So you should make the right choice now. So everybody's going to have their own sort of way of deciding. That's up to every individual. But if it were me, what I would do is, the best thing to do to really get an appraisal of what that world is like would be to sit down with several people that are in that world. So what I'm saying is to do informational interviews. Okay. I've covered on this channel several times how to discover those people, how to contact them, what to say to them to get to set up an informational interview. Okay. And I myself have done many of these. So, let's say you're considering being a physicist. Well, let's talk to a few physicists. Let's see if we can find a university professor that teaches physics, right? They've got a PhD in physics. They're an academic. Let's see if we can find a physicist that works in private industry, that works for a big medical devices company, that helps them design their products. They're developing new technologies for the medical field, right? New CAT scans, MRIs, things like this. Let's talk to one of these people, these physicists that works in private industry, in the medical industry. Let's sit down with them, get them to explain their job, like how that world works, where it's going, right? Do the same thing for like another type of physicist. Maybe that's somebody that works in an aerospace company, or whatever. You know what I mean? Sit down with if you could sit down with 6 of these people, right? And do 6 interviews, maybe over the period of a month or 2, right? And then you sit down with 6 people from the other option, like biology or whatever, 6 different biologists. One works at a zoo. One works at, a pharmaceutical company. One works in physical fitness, like designing sports equipment or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like a good cross section of those people in your hometown, and get an understanding of what they do, get their opinions of their industry, and what skills are needed, where it's going. Is it in decline? Is it growing? And then you'd be able to make a pretty informed decision. Maybe all the physicists seemed really boring and the work seemed very mundane, whereas the biology side, these people seemed to be doing really interesting things. They were making a lot of money. There was a wide variety of different roles. You know what I mean? So maybe that appeals to you more. So you decide biology, but it's based on something real, you know? Do all the research you can on the internet, that goes without saying, but then supplement it with a few informational interviews with people in that world. And I think that's a pretty informed decision. You know what I mean? Elijah says, that makes sense. I appreciate those thoughts, and I will definitely make sure to dress up for the role plays next time. Well, good. Yeah, I'm also losing my hair too, so you got to get that accurate, or else no one will buy it. You're welcome. You're welcome, Elijah. Thank you for being here. I apologize for that confusion. Yep, for sure. Great advice. Well, thank you. That's awesome. And now, of course, it's gotten dark outside, so I got to adjust my camera the other way. See, science hasn't discovered how to automate the brightness control for a digital camera. Maybe one day in the future, somebody with an Einstein level of like vision and genius will be able to figure out how we could write the code in, Visual Basic or something to do that. Write it in Fortran. That's what I'm familiar with. I think all the coding I did was like Fortran and then C. Not C++, not C Sharp, but C. That was where it's at. Fortran. And then we would laugh at the old school people that programmed in like assembler or something like that. Okay, just a reminder, check out my courses. I'm saying this now because we've reached the end of the chat. There are 20 people here. Thank you for being here. Check out this course. This is about communication skills. Okay, I already kind of covered that. I'll link in the description box below. And check out this course for how to get hired. All my advice in one place. How to get hired in the posted job market that I'm sure a lot of people are at least somewhat familiar with, but also how to get hired on the hidden job market, where the jobs are not posted and you access them via networking. But if you're an introvert, networking for you is going to be over the internet, right? So this shows you how you can put yourself up for those, how you could get those opportunities. If you've never been in this world, you don't know how anything works. So check that out. Link in the description box below. And I've also done videos describing these courses too. So check those out. Okay. Yeah. So coming up on Friday, So today, in an hour, I have a collaborative live stream. I've got, once again, Abby from the YouTube channel Life Work Balance. We're doing another live stream together. She is a recruiter, so you get my sort of perspective and her perspective together, answering questions. So we're going to be doing that starting in about an hour. And then on Friday, I'm going to be doing a live stream about this stuff, but also one about business. So like business in general, higher level business stuff. So if anybody is interested in like leadership and management and like how to get into that world and, all that kind of stuff, if you're interested in that, stop by and you could ask questions there. We'll be talking about that. Next week, I got my usual live streams, but on Wednesday, like 1 week from today, I'll be doing a rather unusual live stream for me. I'm going to be talking to somebody called, I think it's Paul Chatto, who is a ex-Canadian TV executive. We're going to be talking about Hollywood and modern entertainment, which is like a total departure for me. But what I'm interested in is the financials of a lot of like the Hollywood movie studios, because their kind of strange behavior over the last 10 years is actually governed by their financials. They've done some really interesting financial things that's kind of pushed them and tied them to a certain strategy. And I think that's quite interesting. I've never seen anything like this before, like in all of business, than what we're seeing now. So we're going to be talking about that kind of stuff. And Paul is like, he's been an insider on like, and TV and stuff, and how they make the decisions of how they green light shows and all this kind of stuff. So total departure from like what I normally talk about, but it is business related. So that's kind of the link up. So that's going to happen a week from today. It's at least it's scheduled. I'm really hoping it does. So if anyone's interested in that kind of stuff, you can show up and watch me make a fool out of myself trying to talk about stuff that's kind of out of my wheelhouse, put it that way. But I welcome anybody that's going to come and show up and participate and make comments on that stuff, because we'll probably be answering a lot of comments and things too. So there you go. Sheen and Grief says, thanks for all the advice and positive energy, Bill. It helps me bouncing back, and I feel much better than last Wednesday when the layoff hit me. Listen, Sheen and Grief, you are an awesome individual. Okay? Don't let anybody make you doubt that. Okay? The other thing is that these events, like getting laid off and stuff, I mean, I don't want to trivialize them because they feel huge in the moment, right? It's like a very real shot at your self-esteem, your source of self-esteem. If you're a provider for yourself and for others, it's like it cuts right to your core. So I'm not trivializing it, but what I am saying is that it's very much a temporary thing. It's like one moment in time. And with time, not only does the sting of it go away and you feel better again, but you fix the situation by getting a new job or changing your occupation or finding another way to make revenue, whatever your situation in life is. So you overcome the psychological stuff and then you overcome the physical stuff, right? The financial stuff. So you're going to be fine. It probably doesn't feel like that, but you are going to be. So just keep your head up and take one day at a time, and you're going to do well. You are not alone. A lot of people are in that position, and it's never easy. It's these times are never easy. So just hang in there, and it'll feel better, and you're gonna do fine. Sometimes you just got to take like some time. Like I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I don't know all the terms. It's almost like PTSD. You're shell shocked. You're in shock. You can't function. You can't like do a job search campaign because you're in like a highly emotional state. That does happen. Sometimes you just got to take a few days. But when you feel able to sort of start to come back, just work on the right things, try and do the smart things. And, that's how it all begins to turn around. So, I'm here Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. If you have any questions along the way, certainly just come back and we can talk about it. And in times like this moment, I got no one else asking questions, so you can see how there is a genuine need for that, and I'm being serious. So I wish you all the best, Sheen and Grief. And this goes for anyone else that's in the similar situation. I know that's the thing about job search. It can be a hell of a roller coaster, and it can be a damn unpleasant one too. For those of you who aren't in like a highly precarious place in life right at the moment, I would encourage you to learn business, like to sort of check out the world of entrepreneurship, because, not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, and that's perfectly fine. But a lot of people are. If you've ever, had a sense of rebellion or a strong sort of creative sense, you have your own ideas of like how to do things, and that's what you want to do. You don't really want to work under someone's thumb your whole life. You find it profoundly unpleasant. Then maybe entrepreneurship might be something cut out for you. Anybody who has a special skill or talent that you want to try and make that your livelihood, entrepreneurship is a way to sometimes do that. Anyone who wants to turn a hobby into their job, like their source of income, So they get to do their hobby full time because that's what they make their money from. Entrepreneurship may be for you. So anyway, this is a path that is open to everybody. It's never been easier than it is now, but it still requires a bit of learning and a somewhat of a certain personality type. So if that's appealing to you, on Mondays, I talk about entrepreneurship. I do a dedicated live stream called Side Hustle Ideas, where we talk about that stuff. So, check that out. That's also why I created a business course that I'm always sort of bringing up all the time. This thing, if you want to learn business, business is the scientific study of how to make money. That's what it is. So as you can appreciate, knowing it is good for a couple of different reasons, even if you just want to manage your money and not piss it away, you want it to grow and, be around for you so you can retire and all this kind of stuff. It's still worth learning business. Things within business like finance and stuff, that's what it's all about. So anyway, check out that course and consider that sort of stuff if you're in that place. Amaze says, what are the core skills you think would differentiate a candidate in a pool of tough competition in this AI age? I imagine that could go any different way. It depends what you're talking about. If you're a group of industrial electricians, or you're a group of graphic designers, or you're a group of interior decorators, or you're a group of educational administrators, it's going to vary, right? I don't think that there's no secret sauce or magic. It just, if you have someone that meets the qualifications and also they have very strong soft skills, among the soft skills, I think likability is the number one. So that ability to have personal charisma. So when somebody first meets you, they get a good impression of you. They think, wow, this person's awesome. I enjoy dealing with them and I'm going to deal with them some more. I'm going to keep this conversation going. I think that's probably the biggest skill of the bunch, right? And if you're wondering specifically how to do that, I don't claim to have all the answers and being the most charismatic person in the world, but the first thing is so stupid. It's like just to look agreeable, right? So instead of looking like maybe your resting face is kind of like, like it might not look super agreeable or approachable, right? Some people are cursed with their resting face is kind of just like, ugh, kind of. Other people they're blessed with their resting face is kind of very pleasant looking, right? So that's a natural advantage, but it doesn't really matter. Practice looking agreeable and approachable. In my case, I don't smile big, showing my teeth. Some people do that. But I kind of do this, I'm trying to look pleasant. I'm trying to seem pleasant. And it's very much a mask that, we all wear, You know what I'm saying? And sometimes when I'm tired, the mask kind of slips. I look more neutral because I'm an engineer type. I'm a technical engineer type, and a lot of technical people are in the same boat as me, where you don't have a lot of respect for that stuff. Doesn't come naturally. So the ones that learn to do it, it's more of an artificial thing that they kind of force themselves to do, and it becomes second nature over time, right? But yeah, so that would be the single most one. So it's the way you look approachable, and then the choice of what to say, right? You are tuned into what the perspective of the other person is if you're talking to another person. So, for example, you would talk about them because people like talking about themselves. It's very flattering. So you would ask somebody how they're doing, right? And then instead of launching into a big story all about you, you ask them a series of questions about them, preferably something that you think they would enjoy talking about, like their favorite hobby or something that they're really into or something that they like. or an opinion they have on something. They like saying their opinions. People like saying their opinions. So if you're the person that enables somebody else to say their opinion, and they think that like somebody actually cares to hear their opinion, they'll enjoy that, right? So that's how you can like go up to someone you don't know and engage them in conversation, and they'll end up loving you. They'll think, wow, that was fun. I really enjoyed talking to that person. Some of that stuff you can do to a degree in a job interview. Others, you kind of can't, because they dominate the discussion in a job interview. That's the problem, But anyway, hopefully that answers your question. That's like, the most important set of skills, and then the single most important set of skill itself within soft skills, I think, is likability, and that's kind of the beginnings of how to get it. Right? There's a lot of people that are qualified, and the purpose of a job interview is not to find the most qualified person. That's not what they're looking for. If it's a hiring manager, they're trying to find the person that they're going to get along with the best, they would want to have around, they would want to work with. So usually likability is the number one thing on their list. The other thing that they're looking for, especially if it's a recruiter, is they're looking for risk factors. So if you're the type of person that's quit every job they've ever had, you're going to appear riskier to them. If you've got a long work gap, other people weren't hiring you. We don't know exactly why, but that could suggest something might be wrong with you. They're going to regard you as a riskier choice, right? So recruiters think in terms of risk, and usually they try and hire the least risky candidate. Hiring managers tend to hire the most likable candidate, the one that they got along the best with, right? So there's a couple of different things going on there. Okay, I'm going to wind this down unless there's any last minute questions. Going once, going twice. Get in the chat if you have anything else. Just a reminder, check out my courses, especially that one for the people here. Linked below in the description box, all my advice in one place with templates and processes and things like this that can help you. It'll help you get a job in the hidden job market. It'll help you get a job in the posted job market. So I'd like to think pretty damn useful to have. Pretty popular course, something like like 780 people or something have taken it. But this is also a popular choice too, right? Like a professional, that's to improve your communication skills. We're just talking about likability and things like that, which is part of communication skills. So, check it out. That can open doors for you. It can help opportunities work out for you, and it can help you get promoted if you're already in a job. So there you go. I will be back in just over half an hour on a collaborative live stream on this channel with Abby, who's a recruiter. We're both going to be doing the stream together, answering your questions. So come and check that out. Until then, thanks everyone. You guys are awesome. I'll see you soon. Take care.